Chris, Sam, and Bree throw a surprise birthday party for their friend Lex. The girl blows out the candles, and then we dive into her memories. She is being wheeled down the long hospital corridors on a gurney. Detective Peterson enters Lex's room and begins questioning her about what really happened to her and her friends on that cursed island. On the evening when her friends were celebrating her birthday, they also told her they knew a way to sneak onto the forbidden island of Kilahuna. Since Lex is writing a book about supernatural forces and truly believes in all of it, and that resort has a terrible reputation because of its ghosts and ancient curses, locals are even forbidden from mentioning its name, let alone approaching the island. Sam, of course, doesn't believe any of the horror stories spreading online, so Lex shows him a video from a TV show. The resort complex on Kilahuna Island was shut down several years ago after a series of unexplained and gruesome events. In ancient times, brutal battles between tribes took place on this land, which is why it has been considered cursed forever. In the 90s, almost immediately after the resort opened, terrifying complaints about ghost attacks began pouring in. One particular room in the hotel became infamous for its nightmares. It was room 306. The hotel staff soon refused to enter that room because strange noises constantly echoed from inside and objects moved on their own. Eventually, room 306 was completely taken out of service to stop the growing horror. All the worst incidents at the resort were caused by the ghost of a girl known as Half-Faced Girl. Rumors say she once lived in the local village but was brutally murdered, strangled with a jump rope, and left to die in the jungle. Wild animals gnawed her body down to the bones. It was most likely a tourist who killed her, but no one was ever arrested. Locals whisper that Half-Faced Girl still roams the island, searching for her killers to take her full revenge. 2 years after opening, the resort was closed forever. Security was placed around it, and the only way to reach the island is by boat, which carries locals once a day. The young friends fly to Hawaii, rent a car, and head to a small airfield. There, they hire a helicopter that takes them straight to the island. The pilot explains how to reach the resort on foot and grimly reminds them, the only boat leaving the island departs at 7 p.m. If they don't want to spend the night in the cursed hotel, they had better keep a very close eye on the time. The friends suggest stopping by the waterfall first before heading to the hotel. After some persuasion, Lex reluctantly agrees. The whole group joyfully splashes around in the water, as if the rest of the world had ceased to exist for them. To Detective Peterson, Lex describes this moment as the last time she felt truly safe. The girl says the entire island seemed to be screaming at them to turn back, but they stubbornly refuse to listen. Hearing that the detective believes her, Lex continues her terrifying story. While resting on the way to the hotel, the friends discuss who among them believes in ghosts and who doesn't. When Sam steps away into the bushes to relieve himself, he suddenly thinks he sees a figure in the distance. He nervously calls out to Chris, but when Chris gets closer, it turns out to be nothing more than an old rag fluttering in the wind. The girls laugh at his fright, while Chris reminds them that they only have 4 hours left before the boat leaves. He points to a lookout point and suggests climbing up to figure out which direction to go next. When they reach the old radio tower, Sam wants to climb to the top to get a better view and find the exact path to the resort. His friends barely manage to talk him out of the dangerous idea, and they continue walking blindly. Reaching the fence, the group squeezes through a hole and finds themselves on the grounds of what was once a luxurious resort. At first glance, it's hard to believe that real horror could lurk in such a paradise-like place. Sam, who has been drinking a bit along the way, starts throwing bricks at the beautiful stained glass windows. His friends disapprove. They came here just to look around, not to cause destruction. Lex suggests going inside. Bree and Chris follow her while Sam stays downstairs. When the others step out onto the balcony, they wave at him. Sam stands outside making rude gestures at the camera. Then he wanders off aimlessly around the grounds while the rest check out room 306. Finding nothing particularly interesting there, Lex asks Chris to take a photo of her next to a broken mirror for material for her book. Detective Peterson tells the girl that there isn't a single photo from the resort on the phone that was found next to her. The last picture was taken right after they arrived in Hawaii. Lex is shocked. She was sure she had gathered great material there. Suddenly, the group is drawn by a strange noise. Stepping out onto the terrace, they see a huge flock of birds circling anxiously right above the hotel. Chris and Bree start getting nervous and say it's time to leave. The boat departs in less than an hour. Lex and Sam reluctantly agree, hoping they can return tomorrow. While the friends argue about which way they came from, the sky quickly darkens and a light rain begins to fall. Chris suggests digging under the fence to get out faster, but Lex suddenly remembers she left her backpack in one of the rooms. She decisively turns back. The others have no choice but to follow her so she isn't left alone. They find the backpack next to a dead coyote. Everyone is confused. They're sure they never went into this area before. Suddenly, Bree notices a car with its headlights on in the parking lot. The group immediately runs toward the gates to get someone's attention, but Chris sharply stops them. They need to turn off their flashlights and stay hidden. After all, they're trespassing illegally. At that moment, a blood-curdling scream echoes through the air. Everyone freezes in terror. When the scream repeats, Chris grabs the first sledgehammer he sees and smashes open the entrance door. Bree panics and jumps into the security car, but Lex and Chris shout that they can't. They could be charged with stealing it. Suddenly, the car doors lock with a loud clang, trapping Bree inside. She hears the security guard on the radio asking them to come downstairs, and he needs help. Sam tries to break the window, but the car suddenly starts by itself and speeds off, plunging down the cliff. Chris leaves the shocked Lex with Sam and goes down to check what happened to Bree. When he returns, his friends are staring motionless in one direction. Turning around, Chris sees a horrifying figure and immediately shouts for everyone to run. The group panics and ends up in the basement, where they hear heavy shuffling footsteps. Then with a roar, the ghost lunges at them. Terrified, the friends bolt. Sam falls slightly behind and the ghost drags him into the darkness. Chris and Lex call out to him, but he walks right past them like a sleepwalker. When they shout again, Sam suddenly attacks and begins choking Chris. His face already looks deathly pale, like a zombie's. In panic, Lex grabs a pair of scissors from the floor and stabs them into Sam's neck. From the darkness, hands emerge and begin ripping the skin off Sam's face, making him scream in unbearable agony. Only now do Lex and Chris realize who they're facing, the half-faced girl. They flee in horror. In one of the rooms, they encounter the ghost again, along with what remains of Sam. Chris tries to reach his friend's mind, but the creature inside him brutally pushes Chris down and stomps on his head with full force. The skull bursts with a sickening crunch, like a ripe watermelon. A stunned Lex barely manages to escape the basement, but in the hallway she is met by Bree. Her friend looks and acts like a real zombie. She doesn't respond to Lex's words and simply strikes a match, then drops it in front of her. After that, everything is flooded with blinding white light, and the memory cuts off. Lex wakes up in the hospital room. The detective assures her that they probably won't find who killed her friends. But when Lex picks up her phone and accidentally points the camera at Peterson, she notices with horror the same strange mark on his hand that was on Sam and Bree. A moment later, the man growls and lunges at Lex, transforming into a monstrous form. While trying to escape, the girl suddenly realizes the terrible truth. She is no longer human. She has become one of the ghosts, doomed to eternally hunt curious tourists, just like they once were. And that's how the film ends.